In a quiet corner of the universe, Earth had always been an unassuming planet. It was neither technologically advanced like the cybernetic empires of Andromeda, nor rich in rare minerals like the volcanic worlds of the Zeta Quadrant. To most interstellar civilizations, Earth was just another blue dot floating in the vastness of space, a place teeming with life but lacking any real significance. The beings who called it home were chaotic, emotional, and often divided among themselves. They fought over borders, resources, and ideologies, seemingly unaware of the greater cosmos beyond their skies. Yet, for all their flaws, humans possessed something unique, an indomitable spirit that burned brightly even in the darkest moments. High above this unsuspecting planet, aboard a sleek silver vessel known as the Xylothian Dreadnought, Commander Vrax observed Earth through a holographic display. His elongated head tilted slightly as he studied the swirling blues and greens of the planet's surface. Vrax belonged to the Xylothians, a species renowned for their cold logic and ruthless efficiency. Over centuries, they had conquered dozens of planets, stripping them of resources before moving on to the next target. To the Xylothians, conquest wasn't merely about domination, it was survival. Their empire thrived on expansion, and Earth was their latest objective. Commander Vrax was not one to waste time. He had spent years studying humanity from afar, analyzing their behavior using advanced surveillance technology. What he found both intrigued and disgusted him. Humans were fragile creatures, easily broken by disease, injury, or age. Their weapons were primitive compared to Xylothian plasma cannons, and their spacecraft couldn't even leave their own solar system without months of travel. But what truly puzzled Vrax was their unpredictability. Unlike the orderly societies of other races, humans were driven by emotions: love, hate, fear, hope, all of which made them erratic and dangerous in equal measure. Still, Vrax dismissed these traits as weaknesses. After all, how could such flawed beings pose a threat to his mighty fleet? The Xylothian armada consisted of hundreds of ships, each bristling with enough firepower to level entire cities. At its core was the Dreadnought, a colossal star destroyer capable of obliterating mountains with a single blast. Surrounding it were smaller cruisers, fighters, and drones forming a web of death that stretched across the stars. The fleet had arrived at Earth undetected, slipping through folds in space-time created by their experimental rift technology. This allowed them to appear directly above their targets without warning, a tactic designed to instill terror in their enemies. And now, after months of careful planning, the moment of invasion had finally come. As the countdown began, Vrax addressed his crew. "Today marks the beginning of our conquest of Earth," he declared, his voice smooth yet commanding. "These humans may cling to notions of freedom and unity, but they are nothing more than ants beneath our boots. Once we demonstrate our superiority, they will surrender. Resistance is futile." His words were met with nods of approval from the bridge officers, who shared his confidence. They had seen countless worlds fall under the might of the Xylothian Empire, and Earth would be no different. Back on Earth, life continued as usual. In New York City, Jake Anderson woke up to the sound of his alarm clock blaring beside him. A construction worker by day and an amateur boxer by night, Jake was known for his incredible strength and resilience. Standing 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and muscles honed from years of hard labor, he looked every bit the part of a modern-day gladiator. But Jake wasn't just physically strong. He had a heart that refused to back down, no matter the odds. Whether it was standing up to bullies as a kid or taking on challengers twice his size in underground fights, Jake had earned a reputation as someone who never gave up. That morning, however, Jake had no idea what awaited him. As he made his way to work, the city buzzed with its usual energy. Cars honked impatiently in traffic, street vendors shouted to attract customers, and pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, glued to their phones. Everything seemed normal until mid-afternoon when the sky suddenly darkened. People stopped in their tracks, looking upward in confusion. The sun disappeared behind a strange, shimmering veil, and then, with a deafening roar, the heavens parted. From the rift emerged the Xylothian fleet, their ships gleaming ominously against the backdrop of Earth's atmosphere. Gasps turned into screams as people realized the magnitude of what they were witnessing. News helicopters scrambled to capture footage, broadcasting live feeds to millions around the globe. Social media exploded with panic as videos of the alien vessels spread. Like wildfire, governments issued emergency alerts, urging citizens to stay indoors while military forces scrambled to respond. But there was little they could do. Missiles launched toward the invaders fizzled out harmlessly, unable to penetrate the aliens' shields. Fighter jets circled helplessly, their pilots staring in disbelief at the sheer scale of the enemy fleet. Jake watched the events unfold on a television screen inside a nearby cafe. His jaw tightened as he saw images of terrified crowds running for cover. Then came the attack. Without warning, beams of searing light shot down from the largest ship, striking Tokyo. Explosions lit up the horizon as buildings collapsed and streets turned into infernos. The message was clear. Resistance would not be tolerated. Humanity's days were numbered unless someone stepped forward to fight. For a moment, Jake felt overwhelmed. Who was he to stand against such power? Just a regular guy with calloused hands and a stubborn streak. But deep down, something stirred within him, a spark of defiance that refused to let despair take hold. Looking around at the frightened faces of strangers, Jake realized that if no one else would act, then he had to. Clenching his fists, he muttered under his breath, "If they think we're going to roll over and die, they've got another thing coming." With that, Jake pushed open the cafe door and stepped outside. The air was thick with tension, filled with the distant wail of sirens and the hum of alien engines overhead. Despite the chaos, Jake felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he needed to do. Little did he know this decision would set the stage for one of the greatest battles humanity had ever faced, a battle that would test not only his strength but also the very essence of what it meant to be human. As the initial shock of the alien invasion began to settle, panic spread like wildfire across the globe. In every corner of Earth, people reacted in their own ways. Some froze in terror, others fled blindly, and a few tried to fight back with whatever tools they had at hand. Governments attempted to maintain order, issuing evacuation orders and deploying military forces to key locations. But none of it mattered. The Xylothian fleet loomed above the planet like an unstoppable force of nature, its ships impervious to human weapons. Tanks fired futile rounds into the sky. Fighter jets streaked past the invaders only to be vaporized by energy beams. And naval vessels launched missiles that exploded harmlessly against invisible shields. Humanity's best efforts were nothing, more than sparks flickering against an unbreakable wall. In New York City, the streets were a chaotic mess. Cars abandoned in the middle of intersections created gridlocks, while panicked crowds pushed and shoved each other in desperate attempts to escape. Storefronts were smashed as looters took advantage of the chaos, grabbing whatever they could carry before disappearing into the shadows. Amidst this madness, Jake Anderson stood tall, his presence almost surreal compared to the sea of fear around him. He wasn't armed with guns or advanced technology. He was just a man wearing a torn construction jacket and steel-toe boots. Yet there was something about him that commanded attention. His broad shoulders didn't slump under the weight of despair. Instead, they seemed ready to bear the burden of hope. Jake made his way to Times Square, where thousands of people had gathered, staring up at the massive holographic screens displaying live footage of the alien fleet. The images showed drones descending from the larger ships, landing in various cities around the world. These machines were sleek and insect-like, their metallic bodies glinting ominously in the sunlight. They moved with precision, scanning their surroundings and firing bursts of energy at anyone who dared approach. Reports poured in from Tokyo, London, Sydney, and countless other cities, all telling the same story. The aliens were here to conquer, not negotiate. Standing atop a shattered fountain in the center of Times Square, Jake raised his voice above the din. "Listen to me," he shouted, his deep tone cutting through the cacophony of screams and sirens. "We can't just stand here and wait for them to kill us. If we don't fight back, they'll destroy everything we've built." At first, no one paid him any mind. People continued to cry, argue, or stare blankly at the screens. But then, a young woman clutching her child turned to look at him. Her eyes widened as she saw the determination etched on his face. Slowly, others began to notice too. A group of teenagers stopped running and stared. An elderly man leaning on a cane nodded silently. Jake's words struck a chord, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, giving up was not an option. Inspired by the growing attention, Jake climbed higher onto the fountain, balancing precariously on its edge. "I'm not saying I have all the answers," he admitted, his voice steady despite the turmoil around him. "But I know one thing. If no one else is going to stand up, then I will. And if you're willing to join me, together, we might just have a chance." His declaration was met with a mix of skepticism and admiration. Some dismissed him as reckless, muttering that fighting the aliens was suicide. Others, however, felt a spark of courage ignite within them. Among these was Maria Gonzalez, a nurse who had been tending to injured civilians nearby. She stepped forward, holding up a metal pipe she had picked up earlier. "Count me in," she said firmly. One by one, more people joined her. Construction, workers wielding wrenches, office employees brandishing broken chair legs, even children clutched shofang. The streets of Manhattan became a battlefield as Jake and his ragtag group of volunteers prepared to face the alien drones. Central Park, once a peaceful oasis filled with trees, ponds, and joggers, was now a war zone. The metallic hum of the invaders' engines echoed through the air as 3 Xylothian drones descended into the clearing, their insect-like legs clicking against the ground. Each drone stood 10 feet tall, its body covered in smooth, reflective armor that shimmered under the fading sunlight. Glowing red sensors scanned the area, locking onto any movement. Without hesitation, the machines opened fire, sending searing bolts of energy sizzling through the air. Jake didn't flinch. As the first bolt whizzed past his ear, singeing the sleeve of his jacket, he charged forward with a roar. His muscles tensed, adrenaline coursing through his veins like liquid fire. He ducked under another blast, closing the distance between himself and the nearest drone. With a powerful leap, he slammed his fist into the machine's side, denting its sleek exterior. Sparks flew from the impact, but the drone barely staggered. It retaliated with a swipe of its razor-sharp limb, forcing Jake to roll out of the way just in time. Behind him, Maria swung her metal pipe with all her strength, striking the drone's leg. Though it didn't penetrate the thick plating, the blow caused the machine to wobble momentarily, giving Jake an opening. "Keep hitting it," Jake shouted, dodging another energy blast. "We can take them down if we work together." Inspired by his words, the rest of the group sprang into action. A construction worker hurled a wrench at one of the drones, striking its glowing sensor eye. The machine twitched violently, temporarily blinded. 2 teenagers used slingshots to launch rocks at the second drone, distracting it long enough for an elderly man with a crowbar to smash its joint. Though none of their weapons could destroy the machines outright, every hit weakened them further, chipping away at their defenses. But the aliens weren't about to let themselves be defeated so easily. Reinforcements arrived, a swarm of smaller drones buzzing through the air like mechanical hornets. They fired rapid bursts of energy, forcing the humans to scatter. Jake grabbed a fallen tree branch and swung it like a bat, batting one of the airborne drones out of the sky. The sound of splintering wood filled the air as the branch shattered on impact, but Jake didn't stop. He picked up a chunk of concrete, debris, and hurled it at another drone, knocking it off balance. Despite their efforts, the sheer number of enemies began to overwhelm the group. One volunteer, a young college student named Sam, was struck by an energy blast, collapsing to the ground with a cry of pain. Maria rushed to his side, dragging him behind a toppled park bench for cover. "We can't keep this up forever," she yelled over the din of explosions and screeching metal. "There are too many of them." Jake gritted teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he surveyed the scene. Bodies lay scattered across the park, some unconscious, others nursing injuries. Yet despite the chaos, something remarkable was happening. More people were joining the fight. Civilians who had initially fled were returning armed with whatever they could find: baseball bats, kitchen knives, even fire extinguishers. Some brought makeshift barricades made from trash bins and car parts, creating barriers to slow the drone's advance. Others used their phones to record the battle, streaming it live online in hopes of rallying support from other cities. Jake realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about humanity itself rising up. High above the fray aboard the Xylothian dreadnought, Commander Vrax watched the footage of the battle unfold with growing unease. The holographic display showed Jake leading the resistance, his every move radiating defiance. What should have been a quick and decisive victory was turning into a prolonged struggle. The drones, designed to crush entire armies, were struggling to contain a single human and his motley crew of rebels. Vrax clenched his clawed hands tightly, his elongated features twisting into a snarl. This was unacceptable. Humans were supposed to be weak, disorganized, and easily subdued. How could one man inspire such unity and resilience? This cannot continue, Vrax growled, turning to his second-in-command Lieutenant Zerk. Send reinforcements immediately, and prepare my personal combat mech. I will deal with this anomaly myself. Zerk hesitated, glancing nervously at the screen. Commander, are you certain? Engaging directly is highly unusual. I am aware of our protocols. Vrax snapped, cutting him off. But these humans must learn that resistance is futile. If their leader refuses to surrender, then I will remove him personally. With that, Vrax strode toward the hangar bay, his mind set on eradicating the source of this unexpected resistance. Back on Earth, Jake and his team managed to disable two of the larger drones, their smoking husks lying motionless on the grass. But the cost had been high. Dozens of volunteers lay injured or unconscious, and morale was beginning to falter. Jake leaned against a tree trunk, breathing heavily as he wiped blood from a gash on his forehead. His knuckles were raw from punching metal, and his legs trembled from exhaustion. Still, he refused to give up. Every time he thought about the destruction in Tokyo and the fear gripping the world, his resolve hardened. He couldn't afford to fail, not when so much depended on him. Suddenly, the ground shook violently as a massive shadow loomed overhead. Jake looked up to see a towering figure descending from the sky, a hulking mech suit piloted by none other than Commander Vrax himself. The mech stood 30 feet tall, its armored frame bristling with weapons and glowing with ominous red lights. Twin cannons mounted on its shoulders swiveled menacingly, while clawed arms flexed with mechanical precision. Vrax's voice boomed from speakers embedded in the suit, amplified to deafening levels. You dare defy the might of the Xylothian Empire? Vrax thundered, his tone dripping with disdain. You are nothing but insects beneath our heel. Surrender, now, and your suffering will end swiftly. Jake straightened, ignoring the fatigue weighing down his body. He stepped forward, meeting the alien commander's gaze without flinching. If you think we're going to roll over and die, you've got another thing coming, he replied, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. This is our home, and we'll fight for it until our last breath. Vrax let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in it. Very well. Let us see how far your courage takes you. With that, the mech raised one of its massive fists and slammed it into the ground, sending shockwaves rippling outward. Trees toppled and people were thrown off their feet as the earth cracked beneath the force of the blow. Jake stumbled but quickly regained his footing, his eyes locked onto the mech. The battle that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The mech moved with terrifying speed, its strikes capable of leveling buildings with ease. Jake dodged and weaved, using the wreckage around him as cover. When the mech fired its shoulder cannons, he dove behind a crumbled statue, narrowly avoiding the explosion. He knew he couldn't win by brute force alone. He had to outsmart the machine. Spotting an exposed panel on the mech's torso, Jake formulated a plan. Grabbing a piece of rebar from the rubble, he sprinted toward the mech, weaving between its attacks. Energy blasts scorched the ground around him, but Jake pressed on, fueled by sheer determination. Reaching the mech's foot, he jammed the rebar into a joint, causing it to seize mid-step. The mech teetered unsteadily, giving Jake the opening he needed. Summoning every ounce of strength, he leaped onto the mech's leg and began climbing upward, clinging to its surface as it thrashed violently. Maria and the others watched in awe as Jake scaled the towering machine, risking his life to reach its weak point. "Cover him!" Maria shouted, rallying the remaining fighters. They unleashed a barrage of rocks, pipes, and debris at the mech, distracting Vrax long enough for Jake to make his move. Finally reaching the cockpit, Jake pried open a hatch with his bare hands and yanked out critical components, disabling the mech's systems. With a final roar, the machine collapsed to the ground, shaking the park with its impact. Inside the cockpit, Vrax emerged, battered and furious. For the first time, he understood fear. Looking up at Jake, who stood victorious amidst the smoke and ruins, he muttered, "Impossible," before collapsing to his knees. The tide of the battle had turned, and humanity's strongest human had proven that even the mightiest invaders could be brought to their knees. The fall of Commander Vrax sent shockwaves through the Xylothian ranks, both literally and figuratively. When the towering mech collapsed in a heap of twisted metal and sparks, the alien leader stumbled out, his elongated frame trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. Jake stood over him, breathing heavily, his fists clenched and bloodied from the fight. The crowd of human volunteers gathered around, their cheers and shouts filling the air as they realized what had just happened. Earth's strongest man had defeated the seemingly invincible commander of the alien fleet. But Jake wasn't celebrating, yet. He glared down at Vrax, who was now on one knee, clutching his side where a shard of shrapnel from the mech's destruction had pierced his armor. "You came here thinking you could just take our planet," Jake growled, his voice low but carrying enough weight to silence the cheering crowd. "You thought we were weak because we're different, because we feel fear, pain, love, and hope. But those things make us stronger than you'll ever be." Vrax looked up at Jake, his glowing red eyes narrowing. For the first time in centuries, the alien commander felt something he hadn't experienced since his earliest days as a soldier. Doubt. His empire had conquered countless worlds, wiping out civilizations that begged for mercy or surrendered without a fight. Yet here was a single human, battered and bruised, refusing to back down even when faced with overwhelming odds. It defied logic. How is this possible?" Vrax muttered, more to himself than to Jake. Jake didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his shadow looming over the fallen alien. "Tell your people to leave," he said firmly. "If you don't, I promise you we won't stop fighting. Every man, woman, and child on this planet will rise up against you. You might have the technology, but we have something you'll never understand. Heart." For a moment there was silence. The wind swept through Central Park, carrying with it the scent of smoke and burnt metal. Then, slowly, Vrax lowered his head in defeat. He activated a small communication device on his wrist, speaking in harsh, guttural tones that echoed unnaturally. Though no one understood the language, the message was clear. The invasion was over. High above Earth, aboard the Xylothian dreadnought, panic erupted among the crew. Lieutenant Zerk watched in horror as the transmission from Commander Vrax confirmed the unthinkable. Their leader had been defeated by a mere human. The bridge officers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. Without Vrax's guidance, the chain of command faltered. Some suggested retreating immediately, while others argued for regrouping and launching a counterattack. But deep down, they all knew the truth. If their mighty commander couldn't handle one human, how could they possibly conquer an entire planet? Orders were issued hastily, and the remaining drones still on Earth began pulling back, retreating to their ships in disarray. Across the globe, the surviving human resistance forces noticed the sudden withdrawal. In London, battered soldiers cheered as alien machines abruptly powered down and flew skyward. In Tokyo, rescue teams worked tirelessly to extinguish fires and tend to the wounded, their spirits lifted by the sight of the invaders leaving. News outlets broadcast live footage of the alien fleet ascending into the atmosphere, their once menacing presence now reduced to a distant hum. Back in Central Park, Jake watched as the last of the drones disappeared into the sky. Exhaustion finally caught up with him, and he sank to his knees, his body aching from the relentless battle. Maria rushed to his side, helping him sit up. "You did it," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. You actually did it." Jake shook, his head managing a weak smile. "We did it," he corrected her. "This wasn't just me, it was everyone who stood up today. Everyone who refused to give up." Around them, the surviving volunteers hugged each other, some crying, others laughing in relief. Strangers became friends, united by the shared experience of standing together against impossible odds. As night fell over New York City, the park transformed into a makeshift camp. Medical teams arrived to treat the injured, while volunteers distributed food and water to those who had fought. Fires crackled in barrels, providing warmth and light as people gathered to share stories of bravery and resilience. Jake sat near one of these fires, wrapped in a blanket despite the summer heat. His hands were bandaged, his face smeared with dirt and dried blood, but his eyes sparkled with quiet pride. Reporters swarmed around him, eager to capture his words for the world to hear, but Jake waved them off. "Not tonight," he told them. "Tonight is for the people who fought beside me." In the days that followed, news of Jake's victory spread across the globe. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like 9EarthStrongestHuman and Never Give Up, as millions celebrated the triumph of an ordinary man turned extraordinary hero. Governments issued statements thanking the brave civilians who had resisted the invasion, while scientists scrambled to study the remnants of alien technology left behind. Schools held assemblies to honor the courage shown during the crisis, and artists painted murals depicting Jake standing tall against the backdrop of falling alien ships. Yet amidst the celebrations, Jake remained humble. When reporters asked him how he managed to defeat such powerful enemies, he simply shrugged. "I'm not special," he said. "I'm just a guy who refused to back down. Anyone else in my shoes would have done the same." His modesty only endeared him further to the public, earning him widespread admiration. Meanwhile, aboard the retreating Xylothian fleet, Commander Vrax sat alone in his quarters, staring at the holographic display showing Earth growing smaller and smaller in the distance. Never before had he tasted failure, and the bitterness of it gnawed at him. The humans had proven themselves to be far more dangerous than any species the Xylothians had encountered. Their unpredictability, their unity, their sheer willpower, it was unlike anything he had ever seen. As the rift closed behind them, sealing Earth off from their reach, Vrax made a silent vow. The Xylothian Empire would never underestimate humanity again. Weeks later, life on Earth began to return to normal, or as close to normal as possible after such a cataclysmic event. Memorials were erected in honor of those who had lost their lives during the invasion, and new alliances formed between nations as humanity recognized the importance of unity. Jake returned to his job as a construction worker, though he often found himself stopping to sign autographs or pose for photos with fans. Despite his newfound fame, he insisted on living a simple life, reminding everyone that true strength came not from physical power, but from the heart. One evening, as Jake walked home from work, he paused to look up at the stars. The sky was clear, dotted with twinkling lights that seemed almost peaceful now. Somewhere out there, the Xylothians were licking their wounds, planning their next move. Jake knew the universe was vast and full of dangers, but he also knew that humanity had proven itself capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. With a small smile, he turned and continued walking, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Months passed since the Xylothian fleet retreated from Earth, leaving behind a planet forever changed by their brief but devastating invasion. The scars of battle were still visible, burnt-out buildings, shattered streets, and fields littered with the remnants of alien technology. Yet amidst the destruction, something extraordinary had emerged, a renewed sense of unity among humanity. Borders that once divided nations seemed less significant now, replaced by a shared understanding that Earth was one home, and its people were all part of the same family. Leaders from around the world convened to form the Global Defense Initiative, GDI, a coalition dedicated to protecting the planet from future threats. Factories once used for cars and appliances were repurposed to build weapons capable of defending against extraterrestrial invaders. Scientists pored over the alien tech left behind, reverse engineering it to create advanced satellites, energy shields, and even spacecraft prototypes. Jake Anderson became both a symbol and an advocate for this new era of cooperation. His face appeared on billboards, magazines, and television screens worldwide, alongside slogans like "Together we stand and never back down." Despite his fame, Jake remained grounded, refusing endorsements or lucrative deals in favor of working closely with GDI. He traveled across continents, meeting survivors of the invasion and encouraging them to rebuild stronger than before. In Tiora, small villages devastated by drone attacks and bustling cities recovering from chaos, Jake's presence inspired hope. People saw him not as a superhero, but as proof that ordinary individuals could achieve extraordinary things when they refused to give up. Yet Jake carried a quiet burden few understood. While the rest of the world celebrated victory, he couldn't shake the memory of Commander Vrax's final words. "You may have won today, but the universe is vast, and your defiance will not go unnoticed." Those words haunted him, reminding him that the Xylothians were still out there, and they weren't the only threat lurking in the stars. Late at night, when the noise of reconstruction faded and the city slept, Jake would sit by his window, staring at the sky. He wondered how long it would be until another fleet descended, bringing with it enemies far more dangerous than the ones humanity had faced before. One evening, while attending a ceremony honoring fallen heroes of the invasion, Jake received an unexpected visitor. A sleek black car pulled up outside the event hall, and a tall woman dressed in a sharp suit stepped out. Her piercing blue eyes scanned the crowd before landing on Jake. She approached him with purpose, extending her hand. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice calm but firm. "My name is Dr. Elena Carter. I'm the head of Project Horizon." Jake frowned, shaking her hand cautiously. "Project Horizon? Never heard of it." Dr. Carter smiled faintly. "That's because it doesn't officially exist, but given your unique role in recent events, we thought it best to bring you into the fold." She gestured toward the car. "May we speak privately?" Curiosity outweighed suspicion, and Jake followed her into the vehicle. Inside, Dr. Carter explained the nature of Project Horizon. It was a top-secret initiative launched shortly after the invasion, tasked with studying alien technology and preparing Earth for potential future conflicts. What she revealed next took Jake's breath away. Fragments of alien communication intercepted during the battle suggested the Xylothians were regrouping, and worse, they had allies. Other species, equally hostile and technologically superior, were aware of Earth's existence now. Humanity wasn't just fighting one enemy, it was facing a galaxy full of them. "We've made progress," Dr. Carter continued, pulling up holographic images on a tablet. "Using the tech recovered from Central Park, we've developed prototypes for defensive systems and faster-than-light travel, but we're still years away from being able to match their firepower. That's why we need someone like you, not just as a fighter, but as a leader." Jake leaned back, processing the information. "You want me to join your secret team? In a way?" Dr. Carter replied. "We're assembling a council of advisors, scientists, military strategists, and civilians who understand what's at stake. Your experience makes you invaluable. Plus," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "the public trusts you. If war comes again, they'll look to you for guidance." Jake stared out the car window, watching the city lights blur past. He thought about Maria, Sam, and the countless others who had stood beside him in Central Park. They had fought not because they were soldiers, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. Could he step into this new role, guiding humanity through whatever challenges lay ahead? Or would he crumble under the weight of responsibility? "I'll do it," Jake said finally, turning back to Dr. Carter. "But on one condition: no secrets. Whatever happens next, the people deserve to know the truth." Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. "Agreed." Over the following months, Jake threw himself into his work with Project Horizon. He trained alongside astronauts learning to pilot experimental spacecraft, consulted with engineers designing planetary defense grids, and addressed crowds of students eager to contribute to humanity's future. Each day brought new discoveries, some promising, others terrifying. One breakthrough revealed that the rift technology used by the Xylothians could be replicated, allowing Earth to explore distant star systems. Another uncovered evidence of a massive interstellar empire known as the Krylos Dominion, rumored to view weaker species as expendable. Despite these revelations, Jake found solace in the growing bonds between humans. Nations that had once been rivals worked side by side, sharing resources and knowledge. Refugees displaced by the invasion were welcomed into communities, their stories weaving a tapestry of resilience. Even children played differently now, imagining themselves as defenders of Earth rather than passive victims of fate. Jake realized that while technology could protect them, it was humanity's spirit that truly made them strong. 1 year after the invasion, a global summit was held in New York City to commemorate the anniversary of Earth's victory. World leaders gathered on stage, flanked by scientists, activists, and representatives from every corner of the globe. At the center stood Jake, his towering figure drawing applause from the audience. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, gazing out at the sea of faces. "A year ago, we faced an enemy that sought to destroy us," he began, his voice steady and clear. "They underestimated us, thinking our differences made us weak. But they were wrong. Our differences are our strength. They remind us that no matter where we come from or what language we speak, we all share the same desire: to live free, to love fiercely, and to fight for what matters most." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Jake raised a hand to silence them. "This isn't the end of our story. Out there beyond the stars, dangers still lurk. But I believe in us. I believe in our ability to rise above fear and stand together. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that humanity isn't defined by the weapons we wield or the battles we win. We're defined by our courage, our compassion, and our refusal to let darkness extinguish our light." As the audience cheered once more, Jake looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Xylothians and their allies plotted their next move. But Jake felt no fear. For the first time, humanity was ready, not just to defend itself, but to step boldly into the unknown. And when the time came, Jake knew he wouldn't face it alone. Together, humanity would ensure that Earth's strongest trait, its heart, would never falter.